Poštovani gledaoci i slušaoci Demostata, dobar dan. Vi gledate još jedno izdanje emisije Pola sata Demostata. Naš današnji gost je ambasador Evropske unije u Srbiji, gospodin Andreas Fon Bekerat. Your Excellency, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So, Mr. Ambassador, on December 10th, the President of Serbia met in Brussels with Ms. Ursula von der Leyen and Antoniom Koštom. Following her statement after her visit on October 15th to Belgrade, that they would meet again in Brussels after 1 month in order to assess whether what had been promised had been implemented. This referred primarily to the election of the REM Council. The REM Council has not been elected, and in the meantime, elections were held in 3 municipalities, which, to put it mildly, cannot be described as having taken place in a democratic atmosphere. Are you informed about the results of the meeting, and was there any discussion of these issues during the meeting in Brussels?
Well, you're quite right that the visit by President Vučić to Brussels was a follow-up after President von der Leyen's visit here in Belgrade, and the idea was to take stock of the reform process and the accession process. And what she said publicly after the meeting was that there had been a good exchange and that she had underlined the importance of accelerated reforms, most notably in the area of rule of law and media freedom, and also that she reiterated EU support for Serbia diversifying its energy dependence to move away from dependence from Russian import of energy. I think there are several important reforms that were discussed. You mentioned the REM Council, obviously incredibly important to put that in place in order to restore more trust when it comes to the media landscape and media freedom. But there has also been other reforms which have been important and that have been discussed, such as the unified voter register. Where we have seen some progress in the last couple of weeks.
You arrived in Serbia at a very specific moment, actually, and at the moment to what is so far the most severe socio-political crisis, but not just that, it's accompanied by a very pronounced polarization and a lack of dialogue. In what way, and is it at all possible for the EU to influence the calming of tensions in Serbia?
Yes, indeed. I've been in this wonderful country for 4.5 months, and I have to say I'm incredibly grateful and honored to represent the European Union in Serbia. It's been pretty hectic 4.5 months because not least of the very dynamic political situation. But I just want to mention how much I have appreciated the hospitality and the kindness that I have been received with by Serbian citizens. When it comes to the current situation in Serbia, I think I've said this several times. I think the biggest challenge right now in Serbia is the very deep polarization. And also the tone of the rhetoric. And I think that it would be in everyone's interest to tone down the rhetoric, to stop with inflammatory rhetoric, and to try to create some sort of space for dialogue. I realize that many think that this is very difficult given the current circumstances and that people are frustrated. But I don't see any other way to improve the situation in Serbia than to try to bring the different stakeholders together and to discuss some of the crucial reforms that this country badly needs, not least within the field of rule of law, but also, for example, when it comes to electoral reforms, where there is a shared interest to implement reforms.
Thank you for your kind words. We also have to say that it's our honor that a diplomat of your caliber is actually in Serbia, and we are very happy to have you here. Speaking of dialogue, is there a way in which dialogue in Serbia could be renewed? Could the EU play one of the key roles in that process, given that for several years now there have been no conditions in Serbia for direct dialogue between the authorities on one side and the opposition on the other side?
Well, I think there is really no alternative to trying to establish the conditions for a conducive dialogue. I think, if you look at what the EU is asking for in terms of reforms, when it comes to rule of law, making sure we have an independent judiciary, autonomous prosecutorial service, when it comes to election reforms, a free media situation, enabling environment for civil society. All of these reforms are very much corresponding to what many Serbian citizens have been asking for when protesting out on the streets. So I really think that the EU can play a role in the sense that we can use these important reforms related to the EU accession in order to bring the different stakeholders together. You mentioned the authorities. Obviously, they need to be included, the ruling coalition, the opposition, but also third stakeholder, which is very important that they are included, is the civil society. Because the whole accession process needs to be a whole of society approach. Everyone needs to be on board in order for these reforms to be truly successful. And again, I understand that many people find it very difficult to create the conditions for this dialogue. And I think that the authorities have a special responsibility. I usually refer it to as the burden of being in power, that the expectations are high on the authorities to reach out to the other side, to tone down the rhetoric, and to create the space and the possibility to engage in dialogue on reforms which would be beneficial for all Serbs.
Yeah, that's exactly why the government should be under the limelight, as it's said. Just to say that at Demostat, when we say opposition, we don't mean just the opposition parties. We mean CSOs, but also trade unions, all the actors who actually are in the opposition. Yeah. So one front of the opposition. Your Excellency, how important is EU enlargement, not only for the stability in the region, as we usually hear, but also for the EU itself?
Well, I think that's two sides of the same coin, basically. Stability in the region is a key priority for the EU. And right now, as I've also said many times, there is a momentum when it comes to enlargement. And that's why we're encouraging Serbia and Serbian authorities to really use this opportunity, because we don't know how long this momentum will continue to be there. So now is really the time to not only talk about how important EU accession is, but also follow up with concrete action. For the EU, enlargement is, it's a lot about geopolitics at the moment. After Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, enlargement is seen as a geostrategic investment into a more stable, more secure, more prosperous, and more united Europe. And hence, that's why there is a momentum right now to make progress on the enlargement file. But this, again, requires that the candidate countries are ready to do their part to implement reforms. And the importance of enlargement is demonstrated, for example, by the fact that only this year we've had the President of the Commission, the President of the European Council, Costa, the High Representative, Kallas, and the Commissioner Kos in Serbia. And I think that illustrates how important Serbia's EU accession is to the European Union. But it's also illustrated by the fact that the member states are starting now to prepare for an enlarged union. because the EU needs to be ready. Once the candidate countries have fulfilled the requirements and are ready to join, the EU needs to be ready to accept new members, including in terms of financial aspects, but also institutional aspects and other relevant conditions that needs to be in place in order to accept new member states.
That's very important message, also very positive. So thank you for bringing it up here. I also hope and believe that's going to be the case. The President Vučić in Brussels also now was telling about potential group of Western Balkan countries entering the EU.
Yes, and I think, first of all, one of my most important job is to really clearly explain to Serbian citizens that we want to see a truly democratic Serbia inside the European Union. We believe that the future of the Western Balkan lies within the European Union. Obviously, it's up to the Serbian citizens in Serbia to make the decision if they want to join or not. But there is a genuine and strong interest on behalf of the EU. But again, the process is based on merit and based on results. And I think that makes it also more difficult to have sort of a whole group joining at the same time, because the different countries are making progress in different ways. Some countries are moving ahead faster than others, and they need to be rewarded also when it comes to crossing the finishing line and obtaining EU membership.
Certainly, that's the only fair way to do that. There is an impression that at this moment, security issues related, for example, to the war in Ukraine are the EU's top priority, while the core valued basis issues that form the foundation of the EU, such as the human rights issues, the state of democracy, media freedom, and so on, come only afterwards, the security situation. How do you comment on this?
Well, I would really not agree with the perception that for the EU, security is more important than values. I don't see any contradiction between the two, because defending our values is part of our security. It's by defending our values when it comes to rule of law, when it comes to democracy, human rights, all of this, not least free media, makes our societies more secure and more resilient. So they are very much part of our security. And also part of our security is to make sure that our neighborhood is more democratic, based on our shared values. So all of this is part of our security. So I don't really agree with this contradiction that we have to choose either our values or our security. And we have also seen that the European Union has very much prioritized also, for example, Democracy Shield was adopted some time ago to counter disinformation. A strategy when it comes to support for civil society was adopted. Also, there has been new measures when it comes to the EU's measures against corruption. So the values of the European Union are always at the forefront. It's always at the center of our policy. And there's absolutely no contradiction between the values and the security. They're both integrated and incredibly important for us.
It's a great point. You mentioned disinformation. Since disinformation, misinformation, malinformation are very, very active campaigns in Serbia, it reminds me of the other project and what is going on regarding other investments in Serbia, incoming investments, especially from the West. We hear a lot of disinformation on these topics. But if EU standards are being formally committed to, and if such projects such as Yada project in Serbia went through the screening and approval process for obtaining strategic project status, would perhaps the EU, so you, be willing to guarantee that these standards will be respected and implemented in practice? It's not just yada, but we have a lot of disinformation. Since it's my topic, I've been following this. But there is also other projects, and disinformation are circulating about Western projects, not about some Eastern projects that I'm not going to mention now. So is the EU possibly there to be the guarantee of all these standards and help us in this way?
There are a lot of questions that you just mentioned. Let me try to sort of take them one by one. When it comes to disinformation, I think it is a big challenge at the moment in Serbia. I have many times emphasized the importance that authorities act against disinformation, and that the authorities are willing to put an end to the anti-EU rhetoric. We have also seen that a majority of media outlets are amplifying many of the lies that are spread. I have exemplified with the fact that a majority of the media outlets in this country claimed that Western countries would complete the colored revolution on the 1st of November. Complete and utter lies. Also, there were lies in connection with the decision by the Council to phase out Russian fossil fuel. And then again, the majority of media outlets claimed that this would mean that we would cut off Serbia from the gas network, which was completely false. And now, recently, we've also seen very bizarre reporting on the fact that at Europe House there was an orange hand which symbolized 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And one media outlet claimed that this showed that the European Union was supporting the so-called blockaders. I mean, everyone that follows politics would know that this orange hand is one of the symbols when it comes to this global campaign, which is supported and driven by the United Nations. So I'm not sure if it's lack of knowledge, lack of information, or if it's a deliberate lies that are being spread, and I fear it's the latter.
I also fear it's the latter, and I hope we are going to have more fight against that. Yes,
and then when it comes to investments and making sure that we have a level playing field for all companies, I mean, obviously, what the European Union can contribute with is that for many investors, rule of law, fight against corruption, and making sure that all companies play according to the same rule. This is very important in order to attract more investments. And this is also exactly what the EU is trying to support Serbia with, to make sure to implement reforms in all of these areas. Also there we have seen some disinformation when it comes to, for example, the Jadar project, which is sometimes, I think, promoted in a way which people would believe that this is an investment which is part of the EU accession process, which is, completely false. It's up to Serbia. It's up to Serbian authorities to decide whether or not they want this project. What the EU is offering is that since it's part of the strategic projects that the EU has listed, that we can contribute with the fact that this project has to live up to environmental standards. It has to live up to the requirements when it comes to dialogue with the local population, employment conditions. All of these standards needs to be at European level. And I think that is something that Serbia could really benefit from.
I'm also asking because our recent research shows dissatisfaction among many companies operating in Serbia with the country's investment climate. Does the EU believe that Serbia's investment climate is fair and equitable? The president is just these days opening another factory. So it's all about investments. Is it possible that all investors are treated equally, especially those coming from the EU?
Well, I think you have to ask the business community about that. And also, I think one indication you will have to look at is the statistics when it comes to foreign direct investments. I think it's important to note, and this is also sometimes not really accurately described in media, the fact that the EU and European EU member states are by far the biggest source of foreign direct investments. Close to 60% of all the investments come from EU countries. And obviously, in order to make sure that these investments continue to come to Serbia, there needs to be clear and transparent rules for all companies and the same rules for everyone. And there needs to be rule of law which makes sure that companies knows that their interests in terms of following the law is protected. I think this is incredibly important. And let me also say that, it's the potential of this country when it comes to attracting new investments and when it comes to growing its economy is absolutely enormous. So with all of these conditions in place, the rule of law not least, but also fight against corruption, also making sure that new laws are implemented in a way which makes it easier for companies to follow these laws. When you have these conditions in place, the potential for Serbia to grow its economy is absolutely huge.
Yeah, this is exactly why we wanted to bring the light to this. New investments actually mean a lot of healthy job climate things in Serbia. And it means that when you have a healthy investment, the workers are not and should not be affected or influenced by any domestic factors, which means they're free to think what they are really thinking and to do what they really want to do. So that's all interconnected. To get back to the annual report on Serbia, you presented the European Commission's annual report on Serbia. You stated that the pace of reforms over the past year had slowed significantly, but also that credible reforms must be implemented in all areas, particularly in the rule of law, the fight against corruption, again, and freedom of expression. Do you see any progress in these areas, if I may ask?
Well, you're right. I mean, one of the key sentences in the report was that there has been a significant slowdown of reforms during the reporting period. And most notably, there has been a standstill when it comes to rule of law and fundamental rights. I think it's important to remember that this report is not, a list of complaints that we're presenting to Serbia. It should be seen as a mirror of the reforms, and it should be seen as a roadmap, as a blueprint for what we believe Serbia should do in order to move forward on the accession path and implement much needed reforms. There has indeed been some progress. I think one example is the Unified Voter Register, the amendments to the law for Unified Voter Register. And I think that is a good example also of what can be achieved when authorities, opposition and civil society work together. Because again, the EU accession process needs to be an inclusive process. And here it's clear that it is possible to agree on important pieces of reform if the stakeholders are ready to work together. Now, I think it's important to move on also when it comes to the other ODIHR recommendations after the last parliamentary election. When it comes to the electoral framework. So there's more work to be done. And on the Unified Voter Register, obviously implementation is incredibly important. There needs to be results which improves the situation. But I think you mentioned before the local elections. We have been very clear that we expect allegations about irregularities and violent incidents, including against the election observers. They need to be investigated as a matter of priority by competent authorities. Because I think that is important, just as the other OD reforms are important in order to establish more trust in the electoral process, because the citizens needs to know that the elections are free and fair. So I think these reforms, and by investigating these incidents during the 3 past local elections, would be an important way to install more trust into the electoral process.
Thank you for that support, and we are looking forward to seeing that investigation. The demands of Serbian citizens who are protesting are the same as the conditions for Serbia's accession to the EU. Yet there are still differing options regarding Serbia's EU membership. Could this change with the presence of a narrative that explains the importance of strong and independent institutions for economic growth and living standards? Also, just to add this, in one of your interviews, you said that the authorities should be, and I quote, an end to anti-EU rhetoric, and that you are ready to debate with anyone who believes that Serbia should not join the EU. How would you explain this position to our viewers and listeners who have such doubts?
So, first of all, I think it's really important to stress that whether or not Serbia should join the European Union is up to the Serbian citizens. I believe that we have a very compelling offer to Serbian citizens, both when it comes to the accession process, the support Serbia is achieving, but also once becoming a member. It's both an argument when it comes to growth and economy. There are many examples of previous member states that have joined. Before coming to Serbia, I was ambassador in Poland. When Poland joined the European Union, their GDP per capita was 50% of EU average, and today it's 80%. Their GDP has tripled since joining the European Union. You would have access to a single market of 450 million consumers. So I don't think anyone argues against the economic benefits of joining the European Union. But I actually don't think that's the most important part. I think the most important part is that the EU accession and EU membership would strengthen all of the democratic institutions in Serbia. It would strengthen and safeguard rule of law. It would make sure that freedom of media, freedom of expression is respected. It would make sure that freedom of assembly is respected. It would make sure that there is an enabling environment both for media and for civil society. And I think these benefits will strengthen the Serbian society. And I think that is actually the most compelling argument for joining the European Union. And let me also, on this note, say something about the national identity. Because sometimes I meet Serbian people that are worried that if we join the European Union, our national identity would be reduced and diluted. I think nothing could be more wrong. If I look at Sweden, for example, since we joined the European Union, our identity has not in any way been reduced. And we want to strengthen and preserve the Serbian national identity. That's why we, for example, are supporting the cultural heritage in Serbia, which is absolutely magnificent. And we want Serbia to preserve its history, its national identity, but as part of the European Union. And that is why one of our mottos is united in diversity. And I think that is one of the things that makes the European Union so great, that there are so many diverse countries that have come together and acted together in a way that benefits all countries.
Under the same roof.
Under roof.
You mentioned Sweden. You're coming from Sweden. Just briefly to say and to add that in the recent study that was done by the European Union on the question to the citizens of the European Union, how much do you support Serbia joining the European Union? There was one country who ended up being number one country where citizens, completely more than 70%, said they want and see us in the European Union. That was exactly Sweden.
That's true. I think close to 75% supported Serbia's accession to the European Union. Thank you for mentioning that, because I think it's interesting to see that the support for Serbia joining the EU is actually bigger among member states than among Serbian citizens. So I think that also demonstrates that both we from the side of European Union have to, improve our communication and be much clearer in presenting all the benefits that EU accession would have. But I also think it illustrates that Serbian authorities have to be much more active when it comes to presenting an objective picture of what the European Union can offer. I've said many times, I'm happy to listen to any criticisms against the European Union and to defend the European Union. But it needs to be based on facts and not on lies and disinformation. And here I think the Serbian authorities have an important role to play.
Almost 3 years ago, at the beginning of 2023, if I'm right, an EU grant for the Belgrade-Niš high-speed railway was signed, amounting to 600 million euros in non-repayable funds allocated to Serbia. So once again, non-repayable funds. The remainder of the total amount for this project is provided by the European Investment Bank, with part coming from the Serbian state budget. This has received very little public attention, even though it is one of the most important infrastructure projects, and I may say even the biggest. What is the current status of this project, briefly, and what can be the completion of works to be expected?
Well, you're right, and thank you for highlighting this important project. So you're right that it's 600 million euros invested as a grant, as a gift to the Serbian people. And it is not only the biggest infrastructure project in Serbia, it's the biggest in the entire Western Balkans.
That's interesting.
And obviously we believe that by building this infrastructure, we will also promote economic development. I had a meeting together with the Deputy Prime Minister Mali a few days ago, discussing how we can accelerate this important infrastructure project. Obviously, it is a very cumbersome process that will take some time. But I'm confident that together with our partners that we will make progress on this infrastructure, and hopefully we will see soon the railroad inaugurated, and again to the benefit of the Serbian people.
At the moment when this interview is being recorded and then aired, there is an ongoing crisis related to so-called NIS, the petroleum industry of Serbia. Where does the European Union stand in this context, particularly in terms of partnership on the diversification of energy suppliers? Demostat has written precisely about the interconnection with North Macedonia and Romania.
Well, I think having seen the development around NIS, the NIS company, I think it's quite clear that Russia is an unreliable energy provider. It uses energy as a political instrument to put pressure on other countries. And we've seen this, how they act with NIS in Serbia. The European Union, on the other hand, we're offering Serbia support to diversify its energy import and to find other much more reliable energy sources. Including, we have offered Serbia to take part in the purchase of gas, the gas platform. We have also invested 1 billion euros into Serbia's energy sector, including, as you mentioned, we've invested in the gas interconnector between Serbia and Bulgaria in order to allow for Serbia to import non-Russian gas, and that means reliable infrastructure. And we have also invested into the preparations, feasibility study to also build the interconnector between North Macedonia and Serbia. Obviously, we're also supporting Serbia through helping Serbia to develop its renewable energy infrastructure. And also one important point, which is not often mentioned, is support to reduce the energy consumption, to improve the energy efficiency. So I think it's quite clear that we have, on the one hand, we have Russia, which is an unreliable energy provider and which does not have the best of Serbian interests at its focus. And on the other hand, we have the European Union, which is supporting Serbia with investments in order to help Serbia to establish infrastructure which will provide them with reliable energy import.
I cannot agree more with what you just said. Thank you, Your Excellency, for this interview. It was a pleasure having you in Demostat's premises. In the end, I like asking my guests a question. Is there anything that you would like to say to the Serbian public? Some kind of message for the end of this very hard 2025, or anything that you want to send?
No, I just again want to say how grateful I am when it comes to the reception I have met during my first 4.5 months here in Serbia. I've been, meeting so many wonderful Serbian citizens. I've had so many fantastic meals in Serbian restaurants here. I mean, the cuisine here is absolutely amazing. And I've also had the chance to travel a bit around the country. I've been to Novi Sad. I've been to Novi Pazar. I'm planning to go to Niš in the near future. And I hope for next year that I will manage and have time to travel a bit more. So my main message is actually, to say thank you to the Serbian citizens for being so kind and so hospitable when I met them during my first time here in Serbia.
Thank you for your efforts and for everything that you are doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Poštovani gledaoci i slušaoci Demostata, bilo je ovo još jedno izdanje Pola sata Demostata. Do sledećeg viđenja i slušanja ne zaboravite da se pretplatite na naš YouTube kanal, ali naravno i da nas zapratite na svim društvenim mrežama. Moje ime je Tamara Bajčić. Do sledećeg viđenja. Prijetno!